and talk to you about children, and talk to you about why every one of you matters so much in those children's lives, because you give them hope. So I will start by a story that I've told many times, and forgive me if you've already heard this story, but I think it bears retelling, particularly because of the people in the room today. So I started my career as a secondary teacher, and then moved into the advisory service, had a career break when I had our two daughters, and whilst I was at home with Catherine and Elizabeth, I was also studying at the University of Cambridge, and I was studying early years and special educational needs. So I started in secondary, now I'm studying early years. I've got my own two little early years examples at home that I was studying. And one particular day I was on the playground of my daughter's school, waiting for Catherine to come out at the end of the day, and the head teacher of the primary school came bowling out across all of the parents, and she said to me, Mrs. Peacock, you're a teacher, aren't you? And I sort of said, yes. So she said, well, the thing is, we've got Claudia. You know, you'll have seen Claudia around school, and I have seen this little girl called Claudia. Well, we've got Claudia, and the thing is, we've just found out that she's got 3 hours, teaching hours, per week, because we want someone to teach her to learn to read. Would you like to come and work with Claudia 3 hours a week and teach her how to read? Now, this little girl, Claudia, was in a wheelchair. I knew that she couldn't speak. She had cerebral palsy. I also knew that I'd never really quite known how I'd taught anybody to learn to read. I'd always been very grateful when they managed to do it, but I'd never really been quite sure what on earth happened, apart from just giving them books. And the idea that I would, in my daughter's primary school, here's the head teacher, very important person, that I was going to be sort of exposed 3 hours a week teaching this child, so I thought, don't say yes. So she carried on talking, and I said, that would be great. I'd love to do this. So anyway, I met Claudia. Now, Claudia had a teaching assistant. Her teaching assistant was called Maria. Maria was Spanish. In this school at this time, the teaching assistants were not allowed in the staff room. I know. So she had no voice in the organisation in terms of being able to be an advocate for Claudia. She just couldn't. Nobody would listen to her. She was way down there in the pecking order. Claudia literally had no voice. And here was I coming in as a teacher for 3 hours a week, so I was never around at any of the staff meeting times or anything like that. My job was to try and help this little girl learn to read. Maria knew how to sign. She had taught Claudia to sign. I didn't know how to sign. So we then all started teaching each other because we started to get books. They were very exciting books. They were the GIN 360 books. You know these books? Mm-hmm. So I was learning the sign, Claudia was learning the word, and we were all together working together. Now, what I learned from Claudia straight away, and you will know this from the children that you work with, is that I recognised really early on that Claudia was going to teach me so much because she was so full of life. She couldn't actually speak, but she could communicate. So she could laugh. That was the first thing. Lots of things were very, very funny, and she was just full of love and laughter. She had no front teeth because she was 7. She had this huge laugh that would come from her tummy, and so many things she would find hysterically funny. She was so proud to have her own teacher 3 hours a week. I felt like I'd got to absolutely deliver. She could say, she could let you know when she agreed. Great big sign. She could sign and make the sound for why. Like this. She could ask you what was happening, why. And she could let you know, no, when something wasn't right. She could make those sounds. But she would communicate with you because she could look into your soul almost. And she cared so much. She was so excited about the idea of learning. Now the thing about Claudia, she was 7 years old at the time when I first started working with her. Nobody knew what she was going to be able to do. So we have the system at the moment in our education system whereby we fool ourselves that we can reliably measure our children, that we can track their learning, that we can then be held to account along flight paths for children in terms of what they can and cannot do. And some of us may well have been in a situation where we've been in performance management sessions where we've promised the earth in terms of where we were going to move these children from here to there by July. It seems like a very long way away when we promised that in September, so we'll absolutely do that. Actually, it's all rubbish, really. That's the reality. I'm sorry I'm being filmed, but it is the truth. It's all rubbish. So the most important thing is, how do you connect with the child? How do you have the openness that we heard from Jane? How do you have the openness to believe that this child can surprise you? How do you allow yourself not to be in a situation where you pigeonhole what the child can do, where you label what the child can do? How can you free yourself from diagnoses that have technical terms about what the child may be able to do in terms of their speech or their reading or so on? How do you free yourself from that to allow the child to surprise you? Because that is your job, actually. Your job is to believe in the child and to provide every possible opportunity for that child to be able to surprise themselves and you and everybody else. So, coming back to Claudia. She's in this school. It's a post-war school, great long corridor. All the classrooms have windows looking out onto the corridor. And right at the end of the corridor were the reading books outside the head teacher's office. Obviously very valuable reading books. They're all outside the head teacher's office. And Claudia in year 2 was way down the corridor. So we would come out, there would be Maria, her teaching assistant, there would be me, Claudia in her wheelchair, and we would come out to change the book, because that is one of the most important bits, isn't it, about learning to read? You change the book and you choose the next book, that's what you want to do. So I didn't want Claudia to miss out on that, so off we go, and we'd be laughing and joking, we'd go up the corridor, she'd choose her new book, and we would come back. As she became more confident, she began to learn to read. The school bought her a computer. They hadn't thought of doing that before, but they did. So she's got a computer. She started to lift her head up a bit more in terms of the school community. So the other children started to notice her more. So on the playground, she became the person that you went to if you've got a problem. She could sort it out. Because you'd go to her and you'd say, Claudia, and she'd look at you, and you'd say, well, this has happened, it's not fair. And she might say, why? And she'd, you'd tell her what had happened. And the best thing is, when you've got a problem, and you go and talk to somebody, you don't really want them to say, the minute you stop or draw a breath, oh, actually, you reminded me of something that happened to me. You don't care, do you? This is all about you. So the children would go to her and say, this has happened, that's happened. She would listen intently. She would empathise with them. She would laugh with them. She would be sad with them. Ultimately, they would tell themselves what they were going to do next. Best possible kind of coach. Off they'd go happily. Claudia was the hero. At home, she had an adopted brother. She was adopted herself. And if you were children, I'd be asking you what you might think that she would like to do best in the world, because we have all of these stereotypical views of disability. We tend to equate disability with fragility. We tend to equate it with sort of a medical kind of notion of what it means. Actually, Claudia's most favourite thing to do was to wrestle. So they would watch WWF on the TV, and her and her brother would wrestle all over the carpet. When she came back the next time from Great Ormond Street, she came back with a walking frame, like a Zimmer frame. And so we would go out of the classroom, Maria on one side, I'd be on the other side, Claudia in the middle, and we would walk up the corridor, Claudia with her frame, and we would go and change the book. And then the day came where we were going to go and do this, and Claudia got up and she just sort of pushed the frame to one side, and she took a step all by herself. And then she took another step all by herself. And the children in the class, the year 2 class, turned round and started to applaud her. They were applauding her. And as we came out of the door of the classroom, the children in the next classroom looked out of the window, and what's this applause? They could hear this applause. And there's their friend, Claudia. Sorry. Walking by herself till we get to the end of the corridor, and the whole school was applauding her. Now, that's amazing. It's amazing because nobody knew that was going to happen. It's not about hero teacher arrives, teaches her to read, she learns to walk. That's not the point of the story. The point of the story is agency. The point of the story is Maria on her own, together with Claudia, couldn't achieve what they needed to because within the organisation they hadn't got a voice. But suddenly, people started to notice, and as people started to notice and they started to do something for Claudia, Claudia was able to respond to that. And it wasn't about micro-measuring what she could do. It wasn't about that. It was about this notion of who knows what might be possible. And I just learned so much from working with Claudia. And I was doing, as I said, my master's at Cambridge, and I was asked to be part of a research study. Now, this is the absolute truth, again, we're being filmed, but never mind. The reality is that I was working by then in a school in Hertford. I was working in a year 5-6 class, and I had a friend who was based at Cambridge, and she said to me, Alison, we're looking for teachers who would like to be part of a study into not labelling children. We'd like to recruit teachers who are interested in learning without limits. She said, we have a real problem. We don't believe in this notion of so-called ability. We think this is a human construct. There's no such thing as ability. It's just a label that we apply to certain learners. And we are looking for teachers who in their classrooms are working in a way that refuses to accept labels, refuses to accept ability. Would you like to apply to be part of this research project? And I again remember thinking, I don't really know what she's talking about. But I didn't want to offend her. She phoned me on a Sunday afternoon. I didn't want to offend her. So I said, oh yes, I will apply. I'm showing you now by this talk that I'm an absolute pushover, and if you ask me to do anything at all, I will do it. Including coming here after a long day being in another tent. But anyway, so I agreed to be part of the study, a Learning Without Limits study. Now this study was published in 2004. But the actual research took place in about 2000. At that time, as I say, I was working with a year 5-6 class. The researcher would arrive at the beginning of the day, so sort of 8 o'clock in the morning. And she'd say, oh, great, now I'm going to come see what you're doing today in your classroom. And I remember thinking, yeah, I haven't really planned it yet, but it'll be fine. And then she'd say, tell me about what you're going to be doing. So we'd be interviewed. I'd be talking to her about the children in the class and what we were doing in terms of the learning. And then she would come and she would spend the whole morning or the whole afternoon watching my teaching, but she was also, crucially, she was talking to the children. She'd invite children to go out and meet with her. And I'd always think, as soon as they went out, you know, what are they saying? She would talk to Shirley, who is still one of my best friends. She was my teaching assistant at the time. She talked to the head teacher of the school. She talked to parents. What they were doing, essentially, was researching the classroom. And they asked me to come to a seminar at Cambridge. There were 9 teachers involved in this first study of Learning Without Limits. I was one of those 9, secondary and primary. And they asked us to come to a seminar at the university, and they said that they'd been analysing what they'd seen in the classrooms, and that they had some interesting potential findings for us. And I can remember this really clearly, because they said, we think that in all of your 9 classrooms that we've been studying, we think that we found 3 core principles that you are all deploying within your teaching. Now, before they talked about this, I don't know about you, but I've never sort of stopped and really reflected on my practice to such a degree that I just did things that I thought were intuitive. I just responded to the children in the best way I could. I didn't label anything, I didn't have names for it. But anyway, they said, we think we found 3 things that all of you have got in common, all of you teachers who are not labelling children. And the first one was the principle of trust. They said, in every one of the 9 classrooms that we have visited, the teachers trust the children, and the children trust the teachers. Now, that doesn't sound terribly earth-shattering, except it kind of is, because if you think about a situation where you've been a learner, and you've experienced someone not trusting you, not thinking you're going to be able to achieve something. I mean, there's some nodding around the room. You probably know what that feels like. It feels very difficult, because if you are not trusted by the teacher, chances are you start to ask questions of yourself. So that idea of reciprocity, that the teacher trusts the children and the children trust the teacher, was something that was the first key finding. And I remember thinking, when they talked about this, I remember thinking, that seems fair. I think that's probably true. I think that is something I really try to do in my classroom. I do try to trust people. I do expect really high things from everybody in the classroom. And that way, you know what it's like. You yourself will experience it. If someone says to you, what do you think? Can I trust you? We could do this. You're like, yes, you can trust me. I'll be there for you. I'll do it. So I felt like I was that teacher. The second principle that they found was, they said, we believe what we're seeing at work in these classrooms is a principle of co-agency. I've never heard of these words. I didn't know what this meant. Agency, meaning that within the classroom, the children and the teacher both had a sense that they could take the learning wherever they wanted to. That they were kind of in charge around here, not just the teacher and the children, co-agency. So this idea of the collective, everybody together and helping everybody else. Because when you're in a classroom, even if you've got 30 children that are all supposed to be the same, they're never the same. Show me any class of 30 children, they're never the same. Even if you've got a set, they're not the same. They've all got different needs, they've all got different personalities, they've all got different likes and dislikes. Thank goodness, otherwise they would be robots. And within that 30, quite often there are children who find learning difficult for all different kinds of reasons, so they can't all be treated in the same way. So the idea that everybody in the room is helping everybody else, and that everybody in the room is supporting the learning of everybody else, not in a deficit way, not in a way that says, oh, that's well done, Jimmy, well done, isn't that great? Not that, but in a genuine sense of, oh, that's amazing, well done. So genuine respect for everybody in the room, that notion of co-agency. And the third that they felt that they'd seen was what they described as the ethic of everybody, i.e. inclusion, the ethic of everybody. It was never going to be good enough in any of these classrooms for the majority to be doing something. It was about everybody. And this is a really important, I think, important way of understanding the principle of inclusion. Because it's not about, in my world, it's not about what we do to make things okay if someone has additional needs. It's about how do we provide learning for everybody. Because everybody has additional needs of one form or another, don't they? I mean, just this room here, we're all different. We've all got different things going on in our heads. I don't want to know, because you're probably all thinking about your tea, but the reality is, we're all very different learners. And we can't all be the same at any one point. So this notion of the ethic of everybody was really fundamental. And I remember this was a real revelation to me at the time. I remember thinking, I think these things do really matter. I think these are things that I can recognise within my practice. I think these are things that I value. And so, do come join us if you want to.
So is this for the mass, for the reception, or earlier? Sorry.
Okay. Everybody except one. Anyway, carrying on. So the notion of those learning without limits principles really felt important. And then, at the time, I was working in a school as a deputy head, and I thought I really need to try these things out as a head teacher. So the book Learning Without Limits was published in 2004. In 2003, I applied first headship. I applied for headship in a school that was in special measures. And I didn't deliberately at the time, apply for that school because it was in special measures, but now that I look back on it, I think the fact that it was in the bottom set, i.e. everybody had said that school was failing, I think that was unconsciously the reason I wanted to be the head teacher of that school, because the school had been described as being, well, the children were described by Ofsted as unteachable, which is lovely, isn't it? And the school essentially hasn't made any progress for 3 years. Can I just check, are we going on till 5:15 or are we finishing at 5 o'clock? What's the timing? Because it does say
final ticket and it's 5:15 on the other programme.
Right, so it's 5 now, what should I do? You've got to go, it's 5. 3 minutes, okay. So, going...
I'm not going to be something, I'll just be noisy.
Don't worry at all. So, going into that school, as I did, I knew that I needed to bring hope to that school. In the way that you bring hope to your children, I knew that I needed to bring hope to that school. And the way that we did that was by listening to the children, by including every single member of staff, by engaging with the parents. I remember talking to the governors at my interview saying, this school is going to have a broad balanced curriculum, this school is going to be somewhere we work with the community, this school is going to become a centre of excellence. And I think probably at the time the governors thought, oh bless. And similarly, I spoke to the parents in the first week of my headship, and I used those slides to say, this is the vision for the school. They didn't really care about the vision for the school. They cared about things like, is my child going to carry on being bullied? Is it going to be all right? Are we still going to get some people running off site because the gates haven't been fixed? These kinds of things. Are we going to have the Christmas play? This was January. Are we going to have the Christmas play? I was thinking, yes. I don't know, it's a long way off, it's Christmas. But at the end of that, the point of me telling you this is the parents were sort of all walking out of the hall, and then this lady came up to me. She was a grandma, became very much a friend of the school. Grandma of some of the children, and she came up to me and she got hold of my arm like this, and she said to me, "You're going to do it, love. You're going to do it." She said, "I believe in you." Now the thing is, we all need someone to believe in us. You all need to believe in you, but you also need to believe in the children that you work with. So I hope I've just given you a sprinkling of that sense that the art of the possible that James talked about at the beginning of this session, that's what you're about. You're about that kind of magic weaving. You're about knowing when to stand back, knowing when to help. You're about celebrating the achievements. You're about the hope for every child that you work with. And looking around this room, I think your children are very lucky. Thank you very much.